This video is going to walk through the process of including math in formal technical writing. The first section will focus on how to introduce formal general equations, and the second section will look at how to include sample calculations. First, a few reminders and pointers about including equations. Every unique equation that you're going to include in your lab report or other technical document gets a number corresponding to the order it's presented in the document. Three different types of items get numbered in this manner. You can have figures that get numbered, you can have tables, and you get equations. Microsoft Word has a fairly robust way to number figures and tables, and this guide walks through a bit of a trick to get the equation numbers formatted correctly. Every equation gets centered and gets placed on its own line. The somewhat tricky part is getting the number on that same line but at the right margin. Generally, equations are the governing relationship of a physical phenomenon. They do not include units, and every equation needs a little bit of explanatory text to give the context of what the relationship is about, and also the equation number. The equation number has to introduce it, and it needs to appear in the text before the actual equation. Another very important one, just like with acronyms, when you introduce this math, these symbols, every symbol that you use has to be defined as they are introduced. You've probably experienced the fact that in one class a variable means one physical quantity, and in another class it means something else. So you have to be clear and make sure you define all of your symbols. Another one that you have to watch out for detailed formatting: Equation Editor automatically makes mathematical symbols italicized. When you use them in other places in your text, you have to make sure to manually italicize. And in other sections of the text, when you're referring to a specific equation, equation 1, equation 2, you need to capitalize the word equation. One other side note in terms of formatting is how to present scientific notation. All of the ones on the right are common things that I've seen in student writing where the caret character is used to indicate exponents in code, but it does not need to show up in your final report. Same thing with an asterisk for multiplication. There are really only two appropriate ways to include scientific notation, and that's the two on the left, where you have the number, the times symbol, and 10 to the exponent, or an engineering style where you use a capital E. At this point, bring up the sample document that we're going to use. Equations get introduced in either a background or an introduction section. I've got just a bit of text filler that would be, background on your lab experiment or whatever, and I'm at the point that we're going to write the sentence that gives an introduction to our first equation, equation 1. In this case, I'm borrowing an example from Mechanics of Materials, and that is Hooke's law, or stress equals Young's modulus times strain. So also known as Hooke's law, relates the stress and strain in a material. So that introduces it by equation number and has a little bit of text to explain what it is. The next sentence is going to include the actual equation that will also define all of the variables that we use. So this relationship is going to put in a line break, and that's where we're going to use the trick to get the formatting correct. And the trick is to insert a 3-cell table. 1 by 3. The left cell is going to be empty. The center cell will contain the actual equation, and the right cell will contain the equation number. So clicking into the right cell, enclose the equation number in parentheses, and then in the Home tab for the text, align that to the right of the cell. Now, in the center cell is where we're going to place our equation. And in the Insert tab, in the equation pull down, we want to insert a new equation. And it says type equation here. One side note, many mathematical symbols are available from the keyboard by actually typing, but that should be avoided. You should always, if it's available up here in the symbol portion of the equation editor, you should use these, particularly the equals, plus, minus, times, because they will scale appropriately, where the ones that you type from the keyboard won't. The same is true for fractions, or brackets, or superscripts and subscripts. Use the tools in Equation Editor so that you get properly formatted, properly sized, and properly italicized mathematics. So this equation is sigma for our stress, and equals. Then we need to type a capital E for Young's modulus, and an epsilon for the strain. That takes care of our equation, but we've got these table lines. 2 steps to get rid of these. The first, select the table. In Table Tools, in Design, in the Borders section, we want to turn off the borders. So we want no borders selected. And in most cases, this is enough. It leaves sort of blue dotted lines, and in most cases those are not going to show up when you print. I've seen with some cases when you print to a PDF they do still remain, so to turn them off entirely, again select your table. In the Table Tools Layout tab there is a View Grid Lines toggle, and take that off. Now that has a properly formatted, properly centered, properly numbered equation. What we're still missing, however, is the definition of the symbols that we've used in the equation. We have also a sentence fragment. This relationship is blah. We're going to continue on the line as if it was a single continuous sentence, where insert symbol, sigma is stress, we need E is the modulus of elasticity, and symbol epsilon is strain. We need to force this to be a lowercase letter, as if this structure is one continuous sentence. And then we need to match the italics here with a Control-I keyboard shortcut, or accessing the italics toggle on the Home tab. We need an italics here, and we need an italics here. So now this 2-sentence sequence is an appropriately formatted way to include an equation in formal writing. Now, moving on to sample calculations. These typically occur in a results section or a data section or later in the report. And this is where you use one of the equations to present your results. And each step should appear on its own line. The first line should be the original symbolic equation, precisely as it was introduced earlier. use a separate line to show any algebraic manipulation that you need to do or substitution of data or other algebraic combination of different equations. In this case, now we're talking about real quantities, so you do need to include units in your sample calculations. And we already presented this as equation 1 earlier in the introduction or the background. So you do not renumber, you do not keep numbering. You still are using equation 1 in a specific case. So back to our document. We have introduced our equation 1 earlier. We've continued writing, and now we have a results section. In this case, we have collected some data. We have a table elsewhere, and we're going to say using the values recorded in table 3, the following calculation uses equation 1 to determine the stress from the measured strain. You're explaining what you're doing in Word. You're saying you're using the equation 1, you're using information from table 3, and you're going to make these following calculations. Now, the easiest thing to do is to go copy equation 1 from where you had it earlier in the document, and we no longer need the equation number, so we're going to delete that. And because we know we're going to have a couple of substitution steps, just going to make a few copies of the same equation. In the first step, we simply restate it. In the second step, we're going to substitute the values that we have. In this case, 1.7, insert symbol times 10. We're going to use an exponent times 10 to the 6th, and we need units in this. And we want all of this, we want that quantity, 1.7 times 10 to the 6 psi, enclosed in parentheses. We know we're going to want the other value enclosed in parentheses, and we're going to fill in our strain value as 0.00232. Strain does not have units. Now, this is formatted with a line break. All we need to do for that is change the column width slightly. You can do that with the column indicators that are up on the ruler, so that's still centered. And now in this bottom segment, we replace the symbols with the answer. For formatting details, any units should not be italicized. And now, again, if desired, we can turn off the grid lines under Table Tools, Layout, View Grid Lines. And that is a complete sample calculation. And after that, continuing on with the remainder of your text.